Here we have example 4, which says compute each of the following expressions. And again, remember, order of operations is always the way that everything is done. So that means that looking at the very first problem, we have -2 plus, and then in parentheses 3 minus 10. Well, we have to do the parentheses first because that's order of operations. So when I do 3 minus 10 or 3 and a -10, those are the same things. Those are opposite signs, so that tells me that I need to subtract. So, and we just do it the easiest way possible. Taking 3 away from 10 would be 7, and then keep the sign of the bigger number. So 10 is bigger, so that becomes a -7. And then I'm going to recopy everything else. Oh, my pen is not working so well. Okay, so now then we have it down to -2 plus a -7. So now our signs are the same, so we're going to add the two numbers and keep the sign. So if you will, again, if you learn your rules, then you can do these pretty quickly. Here we have 8 minus a -5 in parentheses and then minus 10. Okay, so here we have minus a negative. So literally this means the opposite of -5. So the opposite of -5 would be a +5. That's why you've heard all of your life a double negative makes a positive. It's because you're doing the opposite of 5, which gets you back to 5. Okay, so now again we can work with our parentheses. So 8 plus 5, the signs are the same, so we add and keep the sign positive. Minus 10, 13 and minus 10, well, we know that's 3, but the signs are different, so we would subtract and keep the sign of the larger number, which happens to be positive. Now then, for this part C, we've got -2 minus 7 plus 10. So we work with, since this is all plus and minus, we work left to right, and, whatever happens first. We don't do addition before subtraction. Those are equal weighted operations because they're the same thing. Okay, so we need to combine our -2 and our -7 first. So these are the same signs, so we would add the numbers and keep the sign, plus 10. Now then, our signs are different, so we would subtract and keep the sign of the bigger number, so this would be a +1. Alright, let's go ahead and do example 5 while we're here, since that was pretty short. Okay, example 5 says simplify each of the following expressions as much as possible. Show all your work. Okay, so here we have 3 minus, and then in parentheses 2 minus 4x. Well, we're supposed to do our parentheses first, that's true. But there's nothing in here to do because you cannot combine a 2 and a 4x. Those are completely different terms. You can only combine x's with x's and plain numbers with plain numbers. So there's nothing to do, so we have to step back out. But we've talked about the distributive property before, and the distributive property does work in addition. So we can distribute that negative or that opposite sign throughout the parentheses. So that means that we have 3, and then the opposite, or -2, would be -2, and then the opposite of -4x would be a +4x. And now we can combine like terms. So the 3 and the 2 we can combine, but they are different signs. So we would subtract and keep the sign of the larger number, which is positive, plus 4x. Now we cannot combine these because they're not like terms. So our simplest answer would just be 1 plus 4x. Let's do the same thing here with part B. Again, we don't have anything inside the parentheses that we can actually combine because the x and the y are different terms. But we can distribute that negative using that distributive property over addition. So I have x and then minus a negative x. So opposite of a negative x would be a positive x. And the opposite of a negative y would be a positive y. And now we can combine like terms because we have two x's here. X plus x would be 2x, and then we have plus y. So there we go.